Hello, everyone. We are going live in 5 minutes. I hope to see you all in 5 minutes. We are now in 2 Samuel. So 2 Samuel finishing off chapter 1. See you in 5. You know what? I'm going to get rid of that countdown because I know we only have Yosef for little bits before a baby
really hard to hear.
Oh, is it bad?
It's very bad.
Give me a second. Let me see if I can figure this out.
You're very quiet and slightly underwater.
Oh.
Oh, gosh, that's me.
Any better at all?
Oh, yes. Definitely louder.
Okay. Here's hoping.
Where did you guys finish last time?
We were right before the poem begins.
The dirge. Yes. Okay. It's a good one.
Yeah. I wanted to bring you in because, I can hear the baby in the background, and you might go at any moment.
Well, he just fell asleep next to me, so hopefully it's okay. We'll see.
Okay. Lovely. I will try not to scream.
No, that's fine.
Well, we're doing a dirge.
That's true. Well, that's a different type of,
Well, and I wonder, right before let me pull up the passage, sorry, and we'll get to it. And when we do, we can talk a little bit about, I'm very interested in your thoughts on what will be the beginning of our section. So.
Sorry, which section?
We're 2 Samuel.
Yeah.
Chapter 1, and we're starting in verse 17.
17, yeah. Yeah.
And David lamented with his lamentation over Saul and Jonathan his son. And he said it should be taught to the people of Judah. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. So before we go into it, I have my own opinions on the book of Jasher, but I would love to hear yours.
Well, I can tell you that if you look up the book of Yashar, that is currently online, it is not the book that they're referencing here. The book of Yashar, there's someone in Bridges of Meaning who's, I won't name him by name, but he's very active, who loves the book of Yashar, the new version. The book of Jasher, because really he's using, it has a very long history, but basically there is a medieval midrash, which is really a very late compilation of pieces of other midrashim that was called the Book of Yashar, named after this verse, but like very clearly not meant to be some reconstruction of some ancient text.
Right.
However, I can't remember, maybe the 18th or 19th century, an Englishman, a Christian Englishman, gets a hold of this book, thinks it's the original Book of Yashar, translates it to English. It's one of these really early introductions of midrash to the non-Jewish world in some ways, but because they don't know the genre of midrash, they treat it as, they think it's the original book, and they don't understand what midrash is. In some ways, people kind of treat it almost like the way they treat the Book of Enoch, like, which to me is like they think it's like some like long lost scripture that gives you like an alternative version of what really happened in these texts. It has a lot of really interesting and very common midrashim on Genesis and Exodus, like things that are in plenty of other places and that Jews would not say are necessarily wrong. Some of the translations are a little bit funny, to be fair. I've caught a couple funkinesses in it. I never read the whole thing, but I've been asked about parts of it here and there.
Well, and if it's the person that I'm thinking of, they are a friend of the show and might show up at some point.
Oh no. They've never been on camera. I don't.
Oh, okay.
A different person.
Okay, because I believe Jason has read the Book of Jasher.
He may have read it as well.
And might
that's
enjoy
not who
it.
Usually I've been talking about it with, but I can't remember. He's read a couple of midrashim, so it's possible.
Well, and there's certain things where a piece of literature, just because it's not biblical doesn't mean that it's the worst book you've ever read, right? Like, I think you've spoken positively of the Book of Jubilees in some places.
Positively? I mean, I'm not going to say there's nothing positive. I mean, as I said, the Book of Yashar is standard midrash compilation. I mean, I don't necessarily love the English translation, but midrash is a great genre that has lots of value. Jubilees is a more complicated text that was explicitly rejected by the rabbis. We can talk about the reasons why. It doesn't necessarily mean everything in it is bad. It just means that it has some problematic issues. Same with the book. Well, Enoch is even more problematic in many ways. Anyway.
Michael, would you like to say anything about Jasher before we get to the passage?
I don't know. I saw it said 5-minute countdown, and then I went away for a few minutes, and then it was you guys were here, so I feel like I was confused. Did you cut it short?
Yeah, because Yosef can only ever be here for a short period of time. So I was like, if he's here, I'm bringing him on now.
See, my attention span can't just sit there for 5 minutes, so I had to go do something else. That's okay. So the Jasher book, huh?
Yeah.
But this is the late. It's a late, like, pseudo.
Yes.
Whatever.
So there's
right?
two books of Jasher.
It's not the one they talk about in the Bible.
Yeah.
I would say there's three in some sense, right? Because really there's the one that's mentioned in the Bible. There's a medieval midrash, and then there's this English translation of that medieval midrash that is mistaken, right? So I think there's three versions.
A translation with a lot of interpretation.
Yeah, what I meant to say. So first off, Hezi is absolutely right. It also gets quoted in Joshua. That in the sun standing still, and the sun stood still, and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves on their enemies. Is this not written in the book? Written in Sefer HaYashar, which is Joshua 10:13. But the documents that you can read is either a 13th century forgery or a 17th century forgery.
I wouldn't call it the 13th century one a forgery, because there's no claim in that book that this is the original book. This is very common, right? Jewish books often will be named by taking like one or two words from a verse and taking that name.
Right.
But that's not a claim that it was the book. And nowhere in the book there's no introduction that says this is the book, which is different from the English version, which does make that assertion, if I remember. The original. Right. So I think to me that's why I would say there's three books of Yashar.
I just got into this quibble about Tigrog saying that like the Shroud of Turin is a medieval forgery, and it's like, what does that mean that it's a forgery? It's like if it's not the real thing, it's like just a thing that it's its own thing. It's not like there's a real one that it's forging. It's the only one. So like it's either something that lives up to the hype or doesn't, but it's still impressive in its own right, whatever it is.
Right, but this would be, if there's a claim that this is the original book, that, you know, and there was an original book, that would be a forgery in the technical sense, right?
Right.
Anyway, I think the most interesting part of that sentence is not Sefer HaYashar. The most interesting part is how this is teaching the sons of Judah archery, right? It's a very weird verse. You would think that's out of order almost. You would think that, hey, this is this eulogy or dirge or whatever that he wrote and is written in this book, and then it will start in the poetic section of, oh, you don't have this in your translation. Oh, this is so funky. So verse 18 in the Hebrew is to teach the sons of Judah archery, or the art of the archer's bow, or however you want to translate that. But you have it as
Septuagint. Yeah.
Right, which is a very weird. That's a very weird deletion that's happening in your text. Because of course the bow makes a lot of sense, because that is what Benjamin is famous for. They're archers, and in fact that is what Jonathan is famous for, right? We have the scene of him and David in archery, and Benjamin is specifically special because they know how to they shoot. Their archers work left-handed, right? That's something we know special about them from the book of Judges and from the book of, I think, Samuel.
I thought they were throwing a sling at that point.
No. Benjamin's archery, not slings. And this is this interesting kind of like specialization by tribe in different parts of warfare. And David's going to comment on this even later, I'm pretty sure, in this poem. If I remember, doesn't he talk about it later? At some point,
I thought it was slings in Judges.
It is Judges 20. Everyone could sling a stone at a hare and not miss.
Okay.
It's the 700 left-handed Benjamin.
So maybe we'll call them good at what is this, range weapons? Like there's some name for this. Projectile weapons. Here, you'll see the bow comes back. The bow of Jonathan comes back in verse 22 again. And the sword of Saul. Right. Anyway, this is also this is a part of the chapter I know probably best in this section, because this has become liturgically read in a modern ritual when we do Memorial Day in Israel.
When's Memorial Day?
When's Memorial Day in Israel? It's tied to the Jewish calendar, so it's hard. I can't give you an English date for it. It's Yom HaZikaron is like a couple weeks after Passover, like maybe 12 or 15 days after Passover. I'm sure Chezi can fix it. But this became one of like kind of the, I mean, obviously it's not required or whatever, but people like use this reading as liturgically almost on that day to remember that their fallen comrades, sons, fathers, etc.
Mm-hmm. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, right? Yeah. Like that is among the Western world has also become an expression,
mm-hmm.
A lamentation.
We use it in a very different way in English, right? We use it almost like this joking, like not cynical, but I don't know what the phrase is. Like
no, yeah. I get exactly what you mean, because that emphasis is on the failure of Saul, his sin, not the fact that David is mourning him legitimately.
Right. This is an authentic thing that he's saying. Yeah. He's not.
Grief versus tragedy might be a way of saying it. Like downfall, like mighty have fallen is downfall, like they're the downward spiral, versus actually grieving because they literally fell, how they're on the ground.
Yeah.
Okay. So as we're going into it, one of the last things I want to say about the book of Jasher is that it also hints at how the biblical text is written, right? Is that the fact that the book of Jasher can be lost means that the Bible feels comfortable using literature. That it's whatever the Bible is doing in this section, it feels comfortable using what I think is probably, as best we can surmise from just the 2, possibly 3 quotes to the book of Jasher in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, is that it was like epic poetry related to battle. And I like that it's not included. Like
I mean, there's a number of these books, right? There's the book of the War of the Wars of the Lord, right? There's like 3 or 4 of these books, not to mention, of course, in Kings and Chronicles where they cross-reference each other constantly.
Yeah.
But there's these other books that clearly, I mean, now it doesn't say they relied on, or it doesn't necessarily say that this is relying on the book of Jasher. It's just saying there's another account of this story in a parallel text, and you can look there for more. What the relationship is between that text and this text is left very open, which is in all these cases.
Mm-hmm. And I should note as well, Yashar is the upright one. So you could also see why someone
it doesn't necessarily have to be the upright one. It could just be of the upright, kind of as a
of the upright. So you could see why someone would take this title as well, and that could refer to a multitude of things because it's just referring to someone who's upright. Sorry, Kirk, you were about to say something.
I was going to ask Yosef, which of the books of the Apocrypha are most alluded to in the Tanakh?
None.
They're later.
They're all
that's one of their defining characteristics.
Some of them do try to build in attempts at self-reference, like the pseudepigrapha especially are good at this, but it depends on how you understand the additions to the book of Esther, maybe, right? I mean, and the additions in the letters of Daniel, like those to me are the closest to like being interreferential, possibly, like, you know, from a separate recension history. But for the most part, yeah, none of them really work that way.
I see.
Yeah, but All in the Dragon works its way. That's the section in Daniel, I think.
Yeah, well, that's one of. Yeah, there's a couple.
Also, the book of Judith is doing its best to sound like Esther and like Yael, like a jail.
It's a combination, yeah.
In Judges, like it's doing a lot of work to line itself up with Tanakh, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, right, the problem, Kirk, right, is all of the books of Tanakh except maybe parts of Daniel, and this is like a very big academic argument, we don't have to get into it, but all predate the apocryphal books.
Is that the academic? Is there any academic view that says otherwise, or is that
no?
Like...
The only one where there's an academic view that says otherwise is maybe on parts of Daniel, which might be contemporaneous with Maccabees 1. That's it. It also might mean it might mean Daniel's after Ben Sira, but it doesn't seem to reference Ben Sira, so you can't say that there's a clear connection between the two. But that's like you know, we're talking about maybe 5 chapters in Daniel, and that's the strongest that they can make. And that from the academic, yeah, like there's no academic view that the Apocrypha comes before any of the biblical books. I mean, even for the latest dating of the last of the biblical books.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into the text. And one of the things that I'm curious of from your perspective, Yosef, is where you think the book of Jasher is no longer quoting, because there's it's doing it in a lyrical poetic version, but it could be taking one bit from Jasher, or it could be all from Jasher. But either way, let's get into it.
I think it's to the end of the chapter, but yeah, I mean, we can talk about that.
Okay, you think that's all Jasher?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's all from. As I said, I don't know that this is quoting Jasher. It's not clear the relationship between this book and Jasher, but there's a parallel account in Jasher that would imply that I think the whole poem from 19 to the end of the chapter is found there.
Okay. Cassandra knew. This is very funny. This makes me very, very amused. Just Jacob saying, "Since when do Bible studies on my channel discuss the Bible?" It's great. It's great.
When I show up,
Cassandra, you knew that we were going to begin reading the text, and you are the official reader. So go ahead,
Or Cassandy.
Cassandy.
I forgot Kirk likes to read too.
He does, but
Guys.
Kirk talks enough. All right.
Oh,
And no offense,
come on.
Kirk. I like you. I
don't
enjoy
get
that
it.
you're here. But Cassandra's a little more quiet. Okay.
Okay. Your glory, behold, it is written in the book of Yashar, he said, your glory, O Israel, is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, publish it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised exult. You mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew or rain upon you, nor fields of offerings. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul not anointed with oil.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit.
so the first line, 19, is much more poetic than your translation. Is this the KJV?
I think we're doing English Standard Version, which is
Okay.
known for being
I was gonna
clunky.
say, yeah.
It's
So
clunky.
there's an entire subtext to the verse 19, which is it says your glory in your translation. It can also be your precious ones or those who are stationed or standing, but really the word is the same word that we use for deer, like the animal. So one way to read this verse is your deer, i.e. Israel, has been defiled on your bamot, on your high place, like on your what do you call it, like the unofficial altar, right? Like it's like these altars that existed before the temple that you would bring your hunt to like give God a part and then take part in. So it's almost like there's this fascinating kind of interplay here that you don't get in the translation at all, where you have the hero being offered as an improper sacrifice, and
on a high place.
on a high place, which then comes back again in verse 21, right? Because it says the offerings or the that which you lift up from your field has become reviled, the shield of heroes, right? So and also being anointed in oil, right? So there's actually this whole kind of like interplay, which I'm sure Christians will find interesting. I don't usually, whatever, leave that part aside for now. Right, but there's this interplay here with this whole idea of an inappropriate sacrifice being made of these heroes.
Yeah, the NIV translation actually says for verse 19, a gazelle lies slain on your heights, Israel.
Yeah.
How the mighty have fallen. Which is, it's also related, I wonder about this, about the symbol of a crown, right? Where the gazelle with its horns, horns symbolic of, like, crowns will oftentimes be horned, right? Like, when you think of the most typical image of a crown, it's a bunch of spikes, right?
Not in the ancient Near East, though. That's a very Western European mode, right? What diadem do not have horns. They think they fall on both sides of your head. Even in Sumer and Mesopotamia, where they think the king is related to the bull, they don't actually put horned crowns on.
Oh.
So I'd be the throne might have horns / corners, and certainly the ziggurats do, right? And that's reflected in the altars having horns. But the king doesn't wear horns.
Fascinating.
And I'm gonna say, I mean, we stopped at right before 22, but there's another interplay happening here, and it's gonna get amplified more. The word for corpse and the word for defiled are the same in Hebrew. So they're playing between the word halal and halalim, the blood of the corpses, which is also the blood of the kind of profaned or the desecrated, that are, and those are the same thing. And that's the poem is very deeply playing with this idea. In fact, here you have the blood of the heroes being an inappropriate sacrifice on the altar. Maybe so the Christians might be really interested in this, but in some ways it's very anti-Christian because it's saying this is a really bad situation.
Right. Huh? But but it is lining up the death of the king as being a sacrifice on a high place.
A
The
desecrating,
Messiah,
inappropriate sacrifice on an unofficial high place that's rejected by God, and that, but that
Oh,
the
wow.
Philistines would
Okay.
recognize and rejoice over, right? So basically, it's
Right.
an inappropriate, desecrating sacrifice for Israel, which would bring joy to the Philistines.
That's interesting. Does anyone else have any thoughts before we continue on? I want to talk a little bit about this shield not anointed with oil. For 1 second, this verse 21. Where is it?
Well, so
which is the word for anointed is Mashiach, right?
it is. And before we keep calling Saul the anointed of God, right? I mean, that David always likes to call him by his full title.
Yeah, the Messiah. Yeah, Mashiach. And
at the same time, remember that these are leather shields at this period. They oil leather, right? That's how you keep it and maintain it.
yeah.
There's a very kind of practical, kind of military sense here of not maintaining your shield properly.
But I think that it does have a dual meaning because
for sure.
One, when you survive, you then make sure that those items aren't going to rot, right? That they're not going to fall apart. So even later, when metal is used, oil would be used on blades and things like that so that they won't rust. But here, like you said, like putting shoe polish on something. If you don't, then it falls apart. But it has a dual meaning because he is the Lord's anointed one. So that his shield is no longer anointed. That seems super interesting to me.
And yeah, and we also have this word like this, the rejected shield of heroes, and of course he is the one who is rejected by God, and he uses the same phrase. It's the same word. So in some ways, he's been the oil has been retroactively removed from him, or in his misapplication or negligence to apply the oil, he has been rejected.
Good stuff. Anyone else? Then Cassandra, you shall read on, verse 22.
From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan turned not back, and the sword of Saul returned not empty. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely, in life and in death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. You daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you luxuriously in scarlet, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of battle. Jonathan lies slain on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant have you been to me. Your love to me was extraordinary, surpassing the love of women. How the mighty have fallen and the weapons of war perished.
Comments? So, Joseph, you were talking about the bow before.
It means he was gay.
Yeah.
Wait.
Let's not start that conversation.
No, we did talk about this conversation before. So this is the entirety of its source, really, is surpassing the love of women, which is just like.
No offense to Cassandra, but women are annoying a lot of times. So, it's relatable.
And they don't want to hear about how fun it is to kill your enemies. They just don't want those details.
So verse. I mean, again, we have this intense play on this idea that there's inappropriate sacrifices. At verse 22, we get the mention of the bow of Jonathan, which of course is important not just because that's how he fights, but also because of the sign that he gave David with it. The sword of Saul that he died on. And then it's very interesting, right? There's these interesting kind of hints of what's it mean for that his sword should not return empty? Is this like a call for revenge? Like, what's happening here? And then in the next line we have this other really interesting phrase about in their death they have not departed, which we use this liturgically, not just on Memorial Day. We use this like all the time, this phrase, like in memorial services, especially on every Shabbat for like in the Ashkenazi world for martyrs in the Crusades. But there's a clear, interesting theology around death and what happens after death. That they have in their death they haven't departed. It seems to be something happening here. It's a little hard to grasp.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, in the other stream, I don't know if any of you other guys saw that conversation between Kale and Sam yesterday.
Yeah.
Of the telepathy tapes.
Yes.
That's pretty interesting. Just that there are clearly non-material aspects of human consciousness. Because I was bringing up an example in the stream today about when people get organ transplants and then they their personality changes, and sometimes they'll find out it's like, oh, now I love this thing that this other person loved, but they didn't know about it first. So
yeah, I don't know what else I want to add, especially as it pertains to this sort of section.
Yeah, I mean, I would add a couple things. Sorry, I stopped, but I can keep going. There's the mention of the daughters of Israel singing, right? So this has been something that's annoyed Saul all his life, right? This is that refrain. Right. Now David is redirecting them and saying, "Weep over Saul," right? So I think there's something there that we shouldn't necessarily ignore. We also have this very kind of interesting thing about how this has to do with how he dressed them, which is kind of it's very interesting relationship of thinking about the king dressing the daughters of the land in finery is kind of, I have to think about that. That's not an obvious thing we think about the role of the king. And then we have this line 25, which inverts the first line, right? So here we have the mighty falling, but instead of the gazelle of Israel or the statuesque Israel or the glory of Israel, we have it just says Yonatan. Yonatan is for him the glory of Israel, right? I mean, it's kind of. Oh.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. And the honoring, so this becomes very important in the chapters that follow. That David goes out of his way to honor Saul and his descendants. That becomes repeatedly, and Cassandra, I think I said this to you before. You could be very cynical and see this as very political, but David really wants to unify the nation, and part of how he unifies the nation is by honoring Saul not as his enemy, but as a man who was heroic and beautiful. He shows him respect.
I think we talked about before too, how early on, early on when Saul anoints David and all that stuff, and they're all together, how Jonathan hitches his wagons to David's horse there, and basically gets behind him, and he sees the big picture, he sees what's going on, he's totally okay with it. And it's if Saul could have gotten out of the way and allowed he could have accepted the way things are and the transfer of power could have gone peacefully. And it's like, yeah, David would have been king instead of Jonathan, but Jonathan would have been the right-hand man. He would have been, high status, which is almost like, and if you think about like Joseph, Joseph was like the number 2 behind Pharaoh, but he was the one that was doing all this stuff. So it's like,
Yeah, I mean, actually, I was just reading a commentary on last week's Torah portion that was related to this. That was saying, if you look at Saul and Jonathan and David and the promises of that Judah will be the king, and what Benjamin's role is therefore, and why is Saul the first king if Benjamin's not supposed to have the kingship? Hey, hold a second. So this was talking about how, if you look at the Joseph story, Benjamin serves as the bridge between Joseph and Judah, right? Benjamin is the thing that reconciles the two, and there is this potential vision. We can use kind of a Lord of the Rings, like, that Benjamin was going to act as the steward for the kings of Gondor here, the kings of Judah, and that there was like a kind of a vision where they all kind of work together, but Saul couldn't accept that role, which is basically what Michael was saying. But you can actually tie this to the role of Benjamin throughout the text, throughout Tanakh, and in some interesting ways that I hadn't noticed before.
Well, and I wanted to mention what you were saying before about the women wearing scarlet. There becomes an idea, which I think Michael has become interested in, the notion of the Fisher King. And the idea of the Fisher King is that the king might personify the nation itself, and his health is the health of the nation. So the idea that the people are prospering under Saul, like that he's not merely a tyrant who's hurting them, but that everyone's lives are better because of Saul. Seems to be a bit of an idea. Kirk, do you have any comments or anything that was particularly interesting?
Nothing in particular.
Cassandra?
Can I read next? Pretty please. Since Cassandra got to read.
Yes,
so
you
far.
can read next. But just Cassandra, your thoughts on the text.
I don't think I have anything interesting to say. I don't know. I don't think I'm that good at poetry. Yeah, I don't know.
That aspect we haven't talked about, that like the narrative stopped to do a song. Like we're gonna switch what even it is.
I mean, David is the composer of songs, right? That's the famous idea.
Yeah.
Is this something that would have been sung like a lot?
This does seem to be written in a way to sing it. It has a refrain, right?
Yeah. That question is particularly interesting to me, Cassandra, because there also becomes a tradition as to how to sing scripture in general, where there becomes like a rhythm, the role of like a cantor who would know.
I think.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So Yoav is saying, "Let me in." I don't know if Yoav needs a StreamYard link or.
Yoav, I did not see you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right.
Comment and a question. First, the question to Yosef and Chezi. How do you say a singer in biblical Hebrew?
Singer in biblical Hebrew? I know where you're. I mean, I saw your comment earlier. You want to say it's a yashar?
I want to ask.
I mean, the problem is that the construct doesn't make sense. But like, one would.
Well, grammatically, it will be shayar.
Right.
Yeah, because Hebrew is shorer. Yeah.
Yeah. Mishorer. Yeah.
But
It's not a singer though. I mean, well, in modern Hebrew, it's not a singer. It's not actually clear that it's not a singer in earlier Hebrew.
yeah, is the word shorer mentioned in the Bible?
I believe so.
Not sure.
I can't. I'm feeding a baby right now, so I can't pull up a concordance, but I'm pretty
Okay.
sure. Actually, it
Okay.
isn't.
Now for the comment. David had an account to settle because he has done something bad. He has caused a quarrel, quite a public quarrel between Saul and Jonathan. Saul was speaking up quite harshly at Jonathan at one point.
Yeah.
And it was because of David. And David needed that to be mended. So his phrasing is very exact. He says that the two were pleasant and loved, and they're never separated in life and in death.
Yeah.
If you don't know the story, if you don't know them, you think, well, they loved each other. They were always stayed together. They were always pleasant to each other. They always loved each other. What an example of a father and son relationship. This is what the sentence implies without lying, because you can understand it indirectly. Yes, they were pleasant and they were loved by everybody else. So he was mending the history without lying, which is very clever of that poet.
Yeah, it's very interesting because can you read what Jonathan does as not betrayal? Like he's trying to correct his father, but does he betray him? Does he ever abandon his father? That's a good question, and it's complex. Like, yeah.
Also, sorry, slightly tangent. I really like what y'all just said. It's a very good point.
Can you speak closer to the microphone, please? Sorry.
Yeah. I like what you have just said. I've not read Motam Lo Nifradu that way before. That actually makes a lot of sense. I like that. I just wanted to say there is this interesting shift in the poem because we started off with this very strong imagery of this profaned sacrifice, and then we shifted into these weapons of war that are not maintained well. We then switched to clothing, like this luxury clothing, and then at the end here we just switched back. We mentioned kind of the previous themes, right? So it's kind of a poetic element where we mentioned, right, in the refrain, the theme of the inappropriate offering, and then we go back to the very last words, right? The weapons of war have been lost, right? And the weapons of war, right, in some ways, that's like Synecdoche. It's supposed to be, right, like Synecdoche is the weapons of war are the soldiers, are the king and his sons. They're also the weapons, and they're also these weapons that were poorly maintained, right? There's a whole bunch of kind of interplays there that are being interleaved.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to.
I wondered about what you were saying before about the bending of the bow as well, because I think the bending of a bow is how it would be used, but that's also how it would be strung and unstrung. Like people are so used to the image of an archer running around with his bow strung and over his, like, squeezed between it. That's become kind of like an image in depictions. But you wouldn't have your bow strung all the time. That increases the odds that it's going to snap, and it's much larger to move about. So you would take your bow and then you would bend it before and after a battle in order to use it. So for the bow not to be bent is to say, like, it's never going to be picked up again, or like all of those things would all be tied up into it. Similar to the putting oil on the shield at the end of a battle. Jan God says gravy is anointing the meal. Because you pour it on. That's good. I accept that joke. Okay. Do we have anything else anyone wants to say before we jump into the next chapter?
I do wonder. There's this interesting thing going to Yo's point, right? He says they were loved and they were pleasant in their lives. Like, loved by who and pleasant to who is the question. Because love is going to just use an example of just like the relationship with
I can only barely. Sorry, I can barely hear you.
Hi,
Joseph.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Going to
You were
Yoav's,
talking about love.
going to Yoav's point, like earlier it said they were loved and were pleasant, or seemed to be pleasant by, but like, by who, right? Like, who are they pleasant to? Who are they loved by? And then he's in the plural there. By the end of the poem, he uses the same words to describe the pleasant love between him and Jonathan, which obviously is not, there was not a lot of pleasant love between him and Saul, of course. Now, Yoav is reading it as a pleasant love between Jonathan and Saul, which is another way to read it. But then, of course, the third way to read that is that it's between them and the nation, especially the daughters of Israel, which, are the ones who have this interesting refrain that he's about to kind of point to, right? So, like, who's the subject of that? Is, I think, or object of that? I think is a really interesting question.
I find David's response to Saul so interesting. Like, what is going on in his head? Because the last time he encountered Saul, they kind of made peace, but then David was forever running from him. Like, it was very clear he couldn't trust him ever again.
I want to answer about what is going in his head. Either a lot of was lost. One possibility is that this poem is not complete, that we got only fragments. The other option that he's literally sobbing, because understanding this text is not a matter of mistranslation. The text is extremely confused, badly edited. It's a collection of scraps. It doesn't stick together as one literary work, as if it was longer and only scraps remained. Or else, David is literally sobbing, and this is sort of what gets out of his mind while he's busy crying.
Yeah. So now I'm wondering something on that. On everything that we're building. Is the surpassing the love of women? Is the women not the bride? Not the women that David was married to, or the women that Jonathan was married to, but the women who spoke David up. That who cares about what they thought of me? Like, who cares? Like, this has nothing to do with his wives. This is actually just about the crowds of women. Do you think that's a possible reading?
I do. I mean, the role of women in this whole poem is very interesting because you have the daughters of the Philistines and the daughters of Israel, and then you have him with this other women. And it does seem to be about the women as the audience in this poem. It's very interesting.
Okay. I'm really glad we talked that bit through. See, that's the thing, is that I feel like the reading that's become so popular, which is the gay reading, it's just so shallow. It's like not even interesting, where all of these other layers that we're pulling out from it, you lose if you just jump to how a modern person feels uncomfortable by this. Look at Michael Sartori's enormous bicep. Just That's like not even his face in frame, just bicep all the way.
You can't trust the angles online. It's fake.
You like that?
Michael and Joseph actually look pretty similar.
Can't trust the angles online. It's fake.
Is that just me?
I mean, maybe.
I don't know. Bald guys.
Like they're both bearded. Is that
I
what you
don't
mean?
have the biceps though. I can kind of see nothing.
Yeah, I can see it. Michael, you look like you got a little bit. You guys both have a little bit of red in your beards. Joseph, how ginger are you?
Only my beard, but in full sunlight it's red.
Okay.
I'm like my son is a perfect.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to say we move on in the text, if that's all right with everyone.
Yeah,
Then it's
let's
just
get into
taking
the
a
Game of
quick
Thrones
moment.
section.
Well,
That's right.
sorry, what was that, Joseph? I couldn't fully hear you.
I said let's get into the Game of Thrones section. Let's enough with the poetry. Let's get into the
That is
duels
exactly
and
how I hear. I feel exactly the same. This is the Game of Thrones, and Yoav, as a character, really shows up a lot here, which is why Yoav showed up.
Before we move on, I want to mention in passing that not that I don't trust you, David, but I had to verify. So I flew all the way to Athens to the Museum of the Acropolis, and I verified that, yes, they had this bronze covering to the rear part of the spear. So there's not only bronze at the front of the spear, there's only bronze at the bottom of the spear, so you can't stake it in the ground and fall on it.
That's great because that's going to come up. That's how a dude is just about to get killed that way. Okay, Cassandra. Let me share the screen. Ta-da. Here we are. Go ahead.
Okay. You want me to read? Go ahead.
Oh, that's
After
right,
this, David
Kirk.
inquired of
I
the
forgot, Kirk. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. After this, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah?" And the Lord said to him, "Go up." David said, "To which shall I go up?" And he said, "To Hebron." So David went up there, and his two wives, also Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David brought up his men who were with him, everyone with his household, and they lived in the towns of Hebron. And the men of Judah came, and they anointed David king over the house of Judah.
Okay, look at this. David is anointed again as king, right? But so specifically, and the capital for a little bit of this section is Hebron. Okay, so they're not in Jerusalem yet. Okay, they're in the city of Hebron. That becomes kind of the center of things for a little bit. And again, it's not specific that David inquired of Hashem, inquired of the Lord. Doesn't say how, doesn't say how he asked. May have been through the use of the ephod or through the priesthood or through prophets, or like, we don't know. Yeah. That's a great joke. John A says, "I'm late." Cassandra says, "You've just been bumped to John F." I liked you laughing at your own joke as well. It's a great little moment. Does anyone have anything else to add about this first little section before we continue on? Okay, so David has been made king again. How many times? Go ahead, Yosef.
You can hear me here. It is interesting. He brings the two wives that he brings up with him. He does not bring up the daughter of Saul. He does bring up two other wives who represent powerful regions of the north, right? So the Valley of Jezreel and the wife of Nabal from Carmel, right? So he's bringing basically like the other faction of the non-Benjamite faction of the north, in a sense, by bringing those two wives.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting power. There's a lot of power moves here, and it's like a little hard to follow them all unless you like really pay attention to which characters are where. But it's going to matter because Jezreel is about to come up again, right? So like we should start paying attention to these geographic hints.
That it's also, that's a very good way of saying it, because when the daughter of Saul, when Michelle is brought back, that is dedicated, like they dedicate a good chunk of narrative to it, where it's not a good chunk, but it's very dramatic when she finally is returned to David, because she's been married off to someone else at this point. Okay. Go ahead, Kurt.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I would read, but it's lagging pretty bad on my end. I think Michael has to mute himself.
Michael, you Kirk has demanded that you read now from when they told David.
When they told David, it was the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul. David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, "May you be blessed by the Lord, because you showed this loyalty to Saul your Lord and buried him. Now may the Lord show steadfast love and faithfulness to you, and I will do good to you because you have done this thing. Now therefore let your hands be strong and be valiant, for Saul your Lord is dead, and the house of Judah has anointed me king over them."
So I love this, that David honors the men who honored Saul's body, right? We were talking about that section last week, that they honored the body of Saul, and so that's done as well. Okay, Game of Thrones. Go, Cassandra. Oh, Yosef has something to say.
I mean, I was just going to say it's really interesting. It's so subtle here, but if you go back up a little bit, verse 4, right, you have it split into two sentences, but really it is one verse, right? It is his very first act at being anointed when they told David, right? When's when? Yeah, right? That's not a it's not a standalone clause, right? Like it has to. Sorry, it is a standalone clause. It's not a standalone verse, right? Like that has to refer, like at this very height of his becoming king, the very first act of kingship he does is he hears about this and he shows them respect, right? So this is a foundation setting story in some ways.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, my first act as king is to honor Saul.
I'll also
Kurt,
say,
can I see you on camera? Okay, cool.
I'll also say that there's another bit of subtext happening here. So he was told to go to Hebron to get anointed. Hebron is where the patriarchs are buried, famously. So it gives him kind of legitimacy, being crowned in the place of the patriarchs: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Leah, Rivka, and Sarah. Right? They're all buried there. So, and potentially Adam and Eve, if you hold that in At the same time, he's also kind of referencing some Genesis language from the story of Abraham of doing a kindness. So there is this kind of like David as a new forefather figure, kind of being framed here, in the background.
That's beautiful. It's great. Okay, Ishbosheth. Go ahead. Someone? I don't know who.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, Cassandra, let's have you do it.
I was going to say, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. I switched different headphones, so I wasn't sure. But Abner, the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim, and he made him king over Gilead and the Asherites and Jezreel and Ephraim and Benjamin and all Israel. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. But the house of Judah followed David. And the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months.
Okay, so this is the dueling kingdoms, which, as Joseph said, it's Game of Thrones time. So David is not quiet about being king anymore. He appears quiet about the fact that he was anointed king until after Saul has died. But now David, like, there is outright war between the two groups, and he's living in the anointing that he has as king. And Ishbosheth is not made king by Hashem, by God, right? In the Saul David feud, they are both anointed by God, right? But here it's just Abner, the son of Ner. He's like, now you're the guy. It's not God who does it. I've said this before. I also always laugh at Abner, the son of Ner, which is always how his name occurs. Sorry, Abner means my father is Ner, like Ner is my father, or father of Ner.
It doesn't sound as weird in Hebrew. It's because it's a long A sound. It's Avner ben Ner.
Okay.
But still, yes, it is the father of Ner, son of Ner. So it's clearly, right. There's a succession, right, where you name your son after your father, type things. So every other generation.
He comes from a long line of nerds. Yeah.
Yeah, but Ner means candle, right? A ner is a lamp or a candle.
Right.
It's a nice name. I mean, I know it's often used for boys who are born during Hanukkah these days.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, and that's it. Yeah. Abner is, I have said this before, I'll say it again. Abner is David's enemy, but I would rather him be on my side than Joab. I beg your pardon, Joab. But Abner seems to me more loyal, and I don't know. I like him as a character, even though he's doing this stupid act of making of like perpetuating the line of Saul as the line of kings.
Well, look, I mean, David is only kings over the house of Judah. They don't proclaim him king over Israel. Israel does not proclaim him king. It's very clear in this text. So there's no reason to assume that he would be king of all Israel, especially if he doesn't tell people about the prophecy and the other things that have happened, right?
Right.
So like, okay, we need a king. Judah's picked David as their king, but like the rest of Israel isn't picking him, so we need to pick someone else. Let's pick this guy. Now, of course, this text is a polemic because Ishbosheth means son of shamefulness. Right? This is the same word that's used for when Adam and Eve are ashamed in the Garden of Eden. Like the text that we have now is probably not quite his real name, and it's long been acknowledged, just including by rabbinic sources, that there was likely a polemical change of the name here by the author of this text.
Yeah.
Similar to Jezebel, right?
Well, because it's not even son. Ish is man, right?
Man,
So
man of shame. Now there is
man of shame. It's not even son of shame.
There is also like Moses also, when he delays on the mountain, he uses that same word. So there's other ways to read the word that aren't quite as bad, perhaps. But the way that it comes off in this text is that he's a man of shamefulness.
Yeah. Okay, let's okay, it's a long chapter. So maybe I'm not sure what we should do. Are you guys up to do more, or should we cut it there? We've been talking for an hour.
I'm up to more.
I'm here for
more. Okay. Cassandra, Michael, can I get a thumbs up from y'all? Okay, cool. All right. Kirk, it sounds like you're back, so you want to give me a read then?
Sure. Abner the son of Ner and the servants of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon, and Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and the servants of David went out and met at the pool of Gibeon. And they sat down, the one on the one side of the pool and the other on the other side of the pool. And Abner said to Joab, "Let the young men arise and compete before us." And Joab said, "Let them arise." Then they arose and passed over by number, 12 for Benjamin and Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and 12 for the servants of David. Each caught his opponent by the head and thrust his sword in his opponent's side. So they fell down together. Therefore that place was called Helkat Hazurim, which is at Gibeon. And the battle was very fierce that day. And Abner and the men of Israel were beaten before the servants of David.
Okay, so they have a duel, but the duel is 12 on 12, okay? The leaders of the armies, just so it'll make it more explicit, Zeruiah is David's sister. And she has 3 sons that are all people of note, okay? And the one that's super important is Joab. He is fierce and loyal, but also Asahel, I believe, is the other one who's about to kill the guy with the back of a spear. But he was the one where in one of the stories it's different. Like essentially you have to think of it as cousins, right? The people are fractured based on family and tribal lines. So David's most trusted people are the people who is closest in relationship to him. So these are the commanders, and we see what sounds like the David and Goliath thing, which is let's just determine the battle, not by everyone fighting, but by a duel. And it'll be 12 on 12. Okay? And repeatedly, the side of David, the side of Judah, has won. Grabs the guy, thrusts the spear through, or the sword through. And this is our first hint of which way this battle is, like which way the war is going to go. It's the first fight, but every fight afterwards kind of goes in the same direction.
I'm going to add a couple things to that. One, so I had noticed that David was crowned in Hebron. It's not an accident that Ishbosheth is crowned in Machanaim. Machanaim, actually, they just talked. They think they might have found it, the archaeological site finally of Machanaim, but whether they found it or not, it's a large city across the Jordan River, so it's outside of the traditional land of Israel. It's in the Transjordan, in the land of, I guess, Manasseh, probably, and it's right. It's a site specifically associated with Jacob. So you kind of have this like duel between like where the forefathers are buried versus this place where Jacob, had this famous encounter with the angels of the Lord entering the land of Israel when he came back from Laban's house. You do have these counter narratives, very political counter narratives, where they're using geography very intentionally. And again, Givon, right? They're fighting at the pool of Givon, which is also a very kind of interesting location that we could talk about. But it's kind of in between the two locations, and you kind of have this northern and southern thing going on. But it's not just northern and southern, right? It's also kind of because they're on the Transjordan, right? And they're coming back into the land. There's a whole bunch of stuff going east and west here as well. Mm-hmm. A lot of interesting things. And I'll also say one of the other cool things. So where they named the battle Helkat Surim is like the
edge of the blade.
Well, it's not the edge. It's not really. I mean, it can in later Hebrew chalak can mean like the smoothness of the blade, but really it's like the inheritance of the blade. But Surim is related to the name of Yoav's mother, Tsurya, right? So they're actually this is the inheritance of Tsurya in a sense. There's kind of this really fun interplays here that they're doing. And of course, this will matter a lot because the children of, as you were saying, the children of Tsurya are going to kind of be the defining moves of this Game of Thrones on one side at least.
Awesome, good stuff. Cassandra, let's get you to read again.
What was that? Sorry, you were breaking up for a second.
Oh, I said Cassandra is going to read now. And the three sons of Zeruiah.
I can't read right now. It's breaking up. I think I might have to.
Okay, bye, Kirk. It's okay. Thanks for coming.
And the three sons of Zuriah were there: Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Now Asahel was as swift of foot as a wild gazelle. And Asahel pursued Abner, and as he went, he turned neither to the right hand nor to the left from following Abner. Then Abner looked behind him and said, "Is it you, Asahel?" Then he answered, "It is I." Abner said to him, "Turn aside to your right hand or to your left, and seize one of the young men and take his spoil." But Asahel would not turn aside from following him. And Abner said again to Asahel, "Turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I lift up my face to your brother Joab?" But he refused to turn aside. Therefore Abner struck him in the stomach with the butt of his spear, so that the spear came out of his back. And he fell there and died where he was. And all who came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died stood still.
Okay, let's pause 1 second. So we're introduced to it as a family, right? The three boys. And Asahel is as fast as a gazelle, which is swift as foot as a gazelle, which is interesting because that is what Saul was compared to, as we were speaking before.
Or Jonathan, but yeah, one of them.
Yes, that they were gazelle-like. So he's swift after him, and there's this pursuit going on where Asahel is after Abner, and Abner knows if I kill Asahel, I know Joab is going to come for me. The Joab will be after me forever. But he won't stop. Asahel won't stop. So, because again, Asahel and Joab are brothers. So, kills the brother in the battle with the butt of his spear, which seems to be related to the spear being in the ground when Asahel was the one who said, "We should pin Saul to the ground." All coming back, all kind of comes back. Yoav, of course, has a strong opinion about this.
No, I don't. But I want to refer to Jon God's question: how many babies are being produced? I think this is basically what's happening. I think we are at a period transiting from judges to kings. The population is growing. I mean, there is archaeological evidence for that. There was the land was almost empty when the Israelite came in. Because of all of the event of the end Bronze Age or whatever. And now the population is recovering and people are relearning how to socialize. And they're forming family groups and then tribal groups. And then this is the story of moving from a tribal society to a nation state. Because the population is growing. And I'm mentioning this because I'm trying to understand what's going on in this story. It's not very clear what they're fighting about. Because, okay, you have a king of Israel and the king of Judah. These are not warring states. They have
just be divided. Why not just stay divided?
Yeah, they have no territorial dispute because the boundaries between the tribes are very well marked generations ago. And they're not sitting there in order to fight. They're sitting there by the pool. And they say, let the boys play before us. I mean, the verb is very clearly play and not fight. And suddenly this play turns into a serious... it turns sour.
Let's remember that the first time we come across this word in Tanakh is in Bereshit, when when we hear about Yishmael playing in some really problematic way with Yitzchak, in a way that's so problematic, in fact, that he gets right. Him and his mother get kicked out. Like Sarah says, they can't be here anymore. So this, while we might want to read it as play, we also know this word has other meanings. I mean, it's also used obviously with sexual connotations in the Isaac Rivka story, but we know that it doesn't always mean playing nicely, and it can definitely mean playing with weapons. In fact, that is the main midrash on that word, is that, hey, he was shooting arrows at his brother as like, saying I'm just playing, but like there was real serious danger there.
I would translate the word as like messing English around. As messing around, where we still use that. Like, I looked out and there was a couple of people that they were just messing around, right? You're having fun. But if a man and a woman are messing around, that has a completely different connotation. And all of the words, fooling, messing around, like fooling around also has this idea of like joking. Oh, they were joking. They weren't like two guys fooling around. It could be describing them fighting as well. And the same thing, the way that the F word is used as well. I'm just going to say it because it expresses what it is. So apologize, Joseph, to your son. Cover his ears. But like, are you fucking with me means you're messing. All of these terms in multiple languages carry the same idea of an idea of play, which could be challenging, like fighting, because that's what when Moses comes down the mountain and the golden calf situation says he hears that they are playing, right? That there's the people ate and drank and rose up to play, right? It's the same word, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably understand it as sexual connotation, but sure. But yes, it has the same word, and the same type of comments come up. But we also, of course, have the comment that we know it's not the sound of battle, right? That's what Joshua says. I don't hear the sound of victory or defeat. So it's clearly there, not the sound of battle. And I do think it's interesting to read this as maybe this was not meant to be joshing around. There you go. Maybe this wasn't meant to be an actual battle, like some sort of mock battle where they are sort of playing. And the reason why it's so shocking and problematic that Asahel won't stop is he goes too far, and Avner like feels like he's going to actually get hurt, and he like does this in self-defense. But it's a little interesting depending on how you read the verses and what order. If are the verses exactly in order, or is there kind of like a are we getting a vignette in the second half of, we get kind of the summary in the beginning, and then we get a vignette of kind of how this went from kind of a symbolic mock war between 12 and 12 is not a mistake either, right? It's probably like this, right. I would guess it represents the 12 tribes, and like, let's see, like, how, if you can really be the one who takes all 12 or whatever. And this turning away and taking the spoils, it almost sounds like there's a game where like, hey, like try to snatch like this gold purse or whatever from each of the guys. And when you do that, like there's some sort of game here. It's a totally possible reading of this text, but then it kind of gets out of hand. And then when it gets out of hand, then there's this like really big, like, dude, you just really messed up. And now we got to like, now we're gonna have a blood feud.
The sons of Zeruiah also don't let things lay. So you could also see it. I don't know how to interpret it. Like it could be that they are the reason why this turns extra violent. Because they are, I don't know. I don't trust these guys. I don't know how you feel about them, Joseph.
Yeah, I mean, even the name, right? So the name Truya, right? So one could read it as like shaped by God, or like something to do with God being the rock. But really, it seems to be invoking, especially with all the wordplay here, that this is the troubler, like literally God's troubler, or ambusher, or flint, right? I mean, these are all like ways that Soria could be understood. So there's this very kind of interesting interplay here where it's like, are they God's blades or are they God's troublers? Like which, they're kind of these, in some ways ambiguous, because they They are pro-David, but also very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the battle on the Gilboa. There is a difference in war between conscript and professional soldiers, especially in the ancient times when the battle was physical. I was always saying about Shaul that he was a farmer, he was not a warrior.
Mm-hmm.
So Shaul's army was mainly conscript, people that were farmers that were called to the war. They were not good at it because all the professional soldiers were with David. Whoever wanted to earn a salary as a soldier will go with David and raid some Philistine cities. So this is why Israel lost in that battle on the Gilboa.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how Avner survived. But now he has an army, decimated army. Most people have died on the Gilboa. You have already young, inexperienced conscripts. And he's meeting the professional army of David and Yoav. And he said, okay, teach us. Let us have some war gaming. Teach my young conscripts how you fight. And when it turns so bad, Abner is furious. That's for sure. Because they say you should have been teaching me, not killing me.
I like that. I like that
Interesting
as an
theory.
interpretation.
It's an interesting theory.
Yeah,
Have
it's
to think
fun.
about it.
Yoav likes to have fun with these stories. I can see that within there. Yeah, it does seem like it should be part of a bigger story. Okay, let's go back to the text so that we continue moving on. Michael Sartori, I have not heard from you in a while. So
Yeah,
how about I get you?
Okay.
How about I get you to read?
All right. From 24 here? Yep.
Yes, yeah. So these are the two leftover brothers. Go ahead.
But Joab and Abishai pursued Abner. And as the sun was going down, they came to the hill of Ammah, which lies before Giah on the way to the wilderness of Gibeon. And the people of Benjamin gathered themselves together behind Abner and became one group and took their stand on top of a hill. Then Abner called to Joab, "Shall the sword devour forever? Do you not know that the end will be bitter? How long will it be before you tell your people to turn from the pursuit of their brothers?" And Joab said, "As God lives, if you had not spoken, surely the men would not have given up the pursuit of their brothers until the morning." So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the men stopped and pursued Israel no more, nor did they fight anymore.
I don't think this is positive, by the way. I think what he's saying is like he's trying to make peace, and I think that Joab is upset that he has disheartened the men who would have slaughtered everyone else. Like he's upset that he calmed them down. So trying to make peace, is peace good? That's what's kind of going on here. Let's finish the chapter. Michael, keep reading so that we can finish off this chapter.
And Abner and his men went all that night through the Arabah. They crossed the Jordan, and marching the whole morning, they came to Mahanaim. Joab returned from the pursuit of Abner, and when he had gathered all the people together, there were missing from David's servants 19 men besides Asahel. But the servants of David had struck down of Benjamin 360 of Abner's men, and they took up Asahel and buried him in the tomb of his father, which was at Bethlehem. And Joab and his men marched all night, and the day broke upon them at Hebron.
Okay. So all the kingdoms are coming together. This is great. But look at, and I think this lines up with what Joab was saying. David's side, 19, it's 20 men because it's 19 plus Asahel. Whereas versus 360, right? It's an absolute slaughter. It's over 10 times as many people.
Yeah, so this is also interesting because this is where the chapter technically ends in the Christian divisions. And the Jewish break is actually one more verse, which kind of summarizes all this. And this goes into the first verse of 3 in your edition, which is kind of
which it shows as a separate bit,
right?
Yeah,
because it's the end of that story. It's the end of the frame of the story, previous story. And there was a long war. In the house between the house of Saul and the house of David. David grew stronger and stronger, but the house of Saul became weaker and weaker, which gets to your point of 20 verse 360, which gets to the point of Yoav was making. It's also interesting because, of course, thinking about what Benjamin's role should have been and what could have been, Benjamin is the tribe that sits between Judah's territory and all the northern tribes' territory, right? Like it's the central tribe in the sense that could have brought, the peace between the two, the north and the south. And it's also the one that's most likely to fight with Judah because they share a border, right? Like, the two guys who are next to each other are going to push and shove each other. At the same time, when they retreat, the Benjaminites keep going back to Machanaim, which is like really far. As opposed to, like, the Judahites are just going down to Beit Lechem and Hebron, like, which is, they're nearby capitals. But these guys are actually retreating to the other side of the Jordan. And maybe that's because they're weaker and they need a lot more buffer zone. Maybe there's more support for the Benjaminites in their brothers' tribes, right? This is Manasseh. So this is, the other Josephite tribes. And kind of the central powers of the north in some ways are Ephraim and Manasseh much more than Benjamin. Certainly they're more wealthy, but then Benjamin had this political leadership role that kind of usurped that. But they keep having to go back, right? And they said, like, right earlier, the confederation he had was like people from Asher and Yezreel. So there's a lot of interesting indications here, kind of different of the same trends of strength and differences in culture. But yeah, I think Yoav's point is well taken. Like, there's no reason for them to be fighting, and the idea that this kind of is a war game, mock fight, whatever, that got out of hand, I think makes a lot of sense. I never read it that way before. It's very, very...
I'm also wondering, with what you were saying, I said this at the introduction of Saul, that Saul is introduced as gathering the wild jackasses. And I saw that as part of what his role was. Like, we know that shepherding was used as a metaphor for kingship, right? So David as shepherd, I think is quite significant. And what you're saying, that Saul is like this gatherer of, like, that Benjamin could have been this role, that they're like the border between a whole bunch of different people to gather them together. That is the introduction of Saul, gathering the wild donkeys, which were known for their stubbornness to bring them together.
Yeah, we get that imagery in the book of Job too, that it's the rejected children whose fathers disown them, which brings back lots of memories from parts of Judges, of course, with the Yiftach and stuff. But the disowned children who have been sent to the wilderness and have learned to survive on their own, and are very hard to corral. And we also actually get the same imagery with Ishmael, right? Ishmael is going to, he's also compared to this kind of wild donkey figure. And he's a rejected son. And of course, Saul is the rejected son. But here's where it doesn't quite work for me, because in some ways, the whole reason that David has a professional army is because he was kicked out of Israel, and he gathered mercenaries to him, and people who had been rejected, who were militant, violent, like willing to kind of not play by the rules, all go to David. So in some ways, it doesn't quite work for me, right? Because there's like this weird inversion of, like, which of them is the wild asses or donkeys or whatever is I think a kind of. Oh, and that's it.
Good.
Oh, my phone is dying now. That might be it.
That's all right. Michael, do you have thoughts? You have unmuted yourself. Oh, I thought you unmuted yourself, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, it's interesting, like that kind of thing of like, what he was just saying about like the rough guys and the other ones, and like, there's always these dichotomies: Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau, and and even like Israel and the nations, and there's the one level of analysis to be like, oh well, these are the good ones and those are the bad ones, but ultimately in God's plan, it's like, he's trying to put them all together, and it's about like finding that right way. But sometimes it's, it happens in a way of conflict where one side is stronger and the other gets weaker. But hopefully they, when it gets to that point where they see like, oh, our brothers become so weak, then they want to protect and value them again, reintegrate like they did in Judges, with the tribe of Benjamin.
Yeah, and there's real question, like, you don't want to be a tyrant to these other people. You want peace, but how do you get peace? How do you become one thing? Like, do you take them over? Do you get into fights? Do you battle them? You massacre their children in the streets? Is that what you do? Right? So there's this real push and pull. And
Well, I mean, there's even like, if you think about it, it's like in the way that it's kind of like the nation is constructed with the 12 tribes and like having their own territories, there is like this sort of built-in pluralism, or it's a this one and many thing. And then it's like, you have the related nations around the border, you have Esau and Ishmael, and then it's like you have Egypt that's, way like on the other side of the, so it's like there's like there's definitely like levels of familiarity and dissimilarity.
Yeah. Anything else from anyone? Cassandra, do you have anything? You're allowed to be quiet today. I accept this.
I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't know if I have anything to say. It was a big chapter.
Yeah, we did a lot of that poem, and then this. It's a big section. This is multiple episodes of a television program.
Right. So the anointing of David, that was done in secret. Like nobody else knew about it.
But that's the whole thing. Is like these guys are made king how many times? Right?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I never thought about that before, that like the rest of Israel didn't know that David had been anointed. So I guess they really didn't know why Saul was trying to kill him.
Right. But then Saul, it's pretty public. It's publicly announced by Samuel that the Lord has ripped away the kingdom from him. And it's right at the same time that David is rising in popularity. Like, but it's strange, isn't it? Like it's pulling back and forth, and it's not clean. Like for me, at least, when I was taught this story, you're kind of taught the story of Samuel anointing David as though David was the first king. It's like, no, he was the second one, right? And like that was in secret, and he's not given the kingdom right away. And that he respects Saul and will continue to for continuing chapters. He's going to track down a descendant of Saul to honor him, to make sure that it's like these actions of peace. Like, do I do I utterly destroy my enemy, or do I honor them in some way to bring as many people forward as possible?
Yeah, that's kind of like an anti Game of Thrones.
Yeah. But Saul's side is playing Game of Thrones. They're anointing their own kids, and all that stuff is happening. And that's one of the stories that we're going to get to soon. In order to take away David's legitimacy, they take his wife away and make her marry someone else. And when that guy comes back, when Michelle is brought back to David, the guy who married her second walks beside her crying his eyes out. Like as his wife is being taken away as a political move. There's not even an indication that David likes her anymore. It's something else. Okay, last comments. Michael, you got anything else?
Yoav, do you have anything?
No.
Cool.
Everybody should have a Merry
right.
Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah.
And
And those are the only real.
That's a good point.
Those are the only real holidays that count.
Yes. Well, I would say, I don't think okay, maybe I shouldn't get into it. Hanukkah is not really, really, really a thing. It's popularity.
Yeah, but it's a Chabad thing, so Jacob loves it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and Chabad is the best stream of Judaism.
But
we talked about it the other night.
It wasn't very popular. It was brought back to compete with Christmas. So it goes back and forth in popularity. But what is really
it's not related to the stream, but I do have a question for Yoav.
Okay, ask Yoav. He's here.
Michael.
He showed up to receive this question.
Yoav, so as an Israeli, I'm curious, what do you think about the scholar Bernard Henry Levi?
Okay, what is the connection? What is the connection between Israel and the scholar?
Bernard Henry Levi is a French Jewish intellectual who wrote a book called Israel Alone and is prominent for defending Israel in a philosophical context.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to pause right there because that is a completely different conversation, which is very interesting, and you guys should talk on Discord about it.
No, we should not, because I have not read the book, so I'm not going to comment on it. But I want to comment on Hanukkah.
Okay.
One book that I read as a child, The Moomins. Did we all read the books about, or saw the animation series about Moomin Troll?
No.
The Moomins? Anybody? No, you don't. Okay, so never mind. The point is that it's very common in any culture, especially European culture, to have the mid-winter light festivity and the midsummer light festivity. It's some kind of a human need to have those kind of events, something that has to do with fire twice a year, midwinter and midsummer. So Judaism was lacking that. So they put Hanukkah as the midwinter light or fire festival, and they invented Lag BaOmer, which has to do with fighting the Romans. So Hanukkah is about fighting the Greek, and Lag BaOmer is about fighting the Romans. They put it as the midsummer fire festivity.
And it should be noted as well that this part of Hanukkah that everyone knows about the candle, about the light lasting 8 days, that is not even in the Maccabees. Like that's not in the First and Second Maccabees.
Yeah, that is my point. There was a need. It's a biological need
That they really wanted.
to give the people those two festivals, the Midsummer and Winter fire festivals, and then some content was put into them. And Hanukkah, well, it's questionable. You said, I mean, so from a sort of a late tradition or very late tradition. Lag BaOmer is even worse. There's absolutely no reason to celebrate Lag BaOmer, which was a complete, utter, humiliated defeat to the Romans. What are you actually celebrating? I mean, there is an answer to that, but it's, well, it was clear that the holiday came first and the reason came second. With Zionism, they were about fighting the enemies, that it was easy to fill them with meaningful context once with Zionism.
And for the Christians in the crowd to know, Hanukkah in English is dedication. It's the Feast of Dedication. And you'll see that, you'll see the Feast of Dedication does take place in John's Gospel, where Jesus is almost stoned to death in a very famous story from John's Gospel. It's during Hanukkah that occurs. Michael, are you about to read to us 100 pages on such topic?
No, but I did put the Thursday Bible study group in the acknowledgments here. So everybody present. Well, I don't think Kirk is. Kirk is present in the rest of the Thursday Bible study group. But
thank you, Michael. Thank you.
So now you're obligated to buy it.
Of course.
Yeah, who here are you gonna have David read a chapter?
If he would like to, I would be very happy to have that be read by him.
I should read a later chapter because I think you're gonna get more people at the beginning and then you're gonna lose people later.
Well, I've made a little spreadsheet. So you can tell me if you want to tell me a chapter you want to read. I will put your name in it, or otherwise, if you want the next one, I'll tell you what chapter is next, I guess.
There was a chapter where you called me to talk about tabernacles.
Yeah.
I could read whatever chapter I helped with then. If there is such a thing.
Yeah, I put my name for those ones, but there's like 3 chapters, so you can have the second 2. The first one is all about my personal experience of building a yurt. So I felt like because it's a first person account, so I felt like I should read it.
Yeah. Well, and that's you and your wife, right? Wasn't it you and your wife made the yurt? Yeah.
No, I made it for the sake of wanting her to like camping more. So I wanted to give her a good experience.
It's beautiful. Okay. We're taking a week off because next week we are celebrating the birth of the son of David, the Mashiach. I'm just saying it because, look, I'm a Christian. I'm not going to pretend I'm not.
This is Jacob's channel.
But it's Hanukkah is the same week this year.
Yeah.
So
yes. Yeah. The Feast of Dedication, rededication.
Which Jesus did celebrate.
I will not dispute with you that he was born.
You know what? That's actually pretty good. I think that's pretty good. Yeah. Look at this. Jesus would want you to do the show next week. You're gonna have to find something else to do, man. We will talk in the new year. So I'll see you guys in the new year. This was a great year for this Bible study.
Happy holidays and a happy new year.
Yeah, and this is the only year that this Bible study existed. So thank you. Thanks, Kurt. Thank you, Cassandra and Michael and Yoav. You guys made my year way better. It's a great ending. We'll see you guys in the new year.